Hello, and welcome to our panel discussion, Leading the Airmen of Today. I'm Gerald Murray, Air Force Association Chairman of the Board, and I'll be your moderator for this session. Our panelists today are leading change in 5 different commands. They include Chief Master Sergeant Brion Blais, Command Chief Master Sergeant, United States Air Forces in Europe and U.S. Air Forces Africa. Chief Master Sergeant Brion Kruzelnick, Command Chief Master Sergeant, Air Mobility Command. Chief Master Sergeant Sarah Sparks, the Command Chief, U.S. Air Force Academy. Chief Master Sergeant David Wolfe, Command Chief Master Sergeant of Pacific Air Forces, and Chief Master Sergeant Charles Moose Hoffman, the Command Chief, Air Force Global Strike Command. I'd like to begin by asking each of you if you would offer a few opening comments, and then we'll get right to our discussion. So Chief Blais, you first.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I'll actually be really quick. I just wanted to say welcome to everyone. I'm really looking forward to the questions, being part of this panel. I've been in this seat for about 1.5 years now, really operationally focused command, and so I'm excited to hear some of the questions that come through here and the responses of my teammates.
All right, thanks Chief Blais. All right, Chief Kruzelnick, BK.
Chief, the chairman, such a cool title, but probably not as cool as the Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force. But before I get started, I really just want to say thank you and a big thank you to AFA for doing another enlisted panel. I think last year might have been the first one, and now you continued it out and actually even grew a little bit because I think there's going to be an enlisted Guardian panel as well. It really just shows the diversity and evolution of not only the organization, but the symposium. So to all you enlisted Guardian and Airmen out there, I would suggest if you're not currently a member of AFA, I would offer that you consider it as part of your professional development. So on behalf of the Air Mobility Command Commander and my wingman, my best friend, Gerald, I'm humbled to represent our AMC Airmen. However, I think for this panel, like my friends, we're probably just representing the incredible enlisted airmen that we have in our force today. So I'm not going to dive too much into what Air Mobility Command does. I think everybody gets it. We do rapid global mobility for the nation. But for this particular panel, we'll probably just focus on the actual topic, leading the airmen of today. I might stretch it out a little bit and say leading the airmen of today in the environment of today, because we are not short on opportunity in this contested environment. We have COVID-19 and it's now 2021. We have diversity, we have inclusion, we have resiliency issues we're pushing through, we have physical constraints, and the list just keeps kind of going on and on and on. So we definitely have a lot of opportunity to get after some things. You know, this week we'll hear about emerging technologies, innovation, maybe combat agility, and all that's very important, but I think we should never lose focus on our biggest competitive and comparable advantage, and that's our force. That is our whole entire professional force. So these are the ones that accelerate change. These are the ones that are going to deliver on readiness, and to kind of steal a term from the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the Marine Commandant. Readiness, not in a mere sense of availability, but any ability to have capability today and into the future. And that's what we do. You know, Chief, similar to your times, I think we have people in our ranks that are really driven, kind of meek. You know, maybe some of them are really strong, some of them are vulnerable, some are carefree, and some of them are straight out overwhelmed. And in any given day, I could be any one of those myself. So as leaders, we can decide what's important. We just can't decide who's important, because everybody's important. So our leaders need to have that curious nature to try to get to know people. This way we can connect with them, and on that side we can give them or have them understand their daily purpose. And we shouldn't ever underestimate daily purpose. So I believe that kind of speaks maybe to General Brown's accelerate, change, or lose, his action orders, as well as Chief Bass's focus on people, readiness, and culture. And that's just my initial thoughts, Chief. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, great. Thanks, Chief. Look forward to hearing more from you. All right, Chief Wolfe. David?
Thanks a lot, Chief Murray and AFA. I don't know about the rest of the panel members, but just prior to kind of getting in the mode to do this panel, it occurred to me that I'm on a panel that's being moderated by one of the former Chief Master Sergeants of the Air Force, and what a great honor that is for us to be here with this company, not only as colleagues, but to be here with you. One of the people who's paved the way for us, and thank you for your continued service as you stay engaged with all these issues that we're talking about. It's an honor to be here. I represent the enlisted airmen of Pacific Air Forces. I know that I can't be on a stage anywhere or in a call of this caliber without mentioning that the Pacific is the priority theater of the National Defense Strategy. I know that that's one thing that we love to beat the drum on. We think that that's gaining even more traction now with things that are going on in the world. And certainly I'm just honored to have some time to learn. I've already taken a note on something that BK said, right? I will probably get more out of this for my own professional growth than I will be able to give, but I'll certainly do my best to represent those airmen across the Pacific. And thanks for inviting us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. I'm certain that you will, as you do, represent them well. All right, thank you. And Sarah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chief Sarah Sparks, representing your Air Force Academy, and I'm honored to be here today with you, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Murray, and for representing AFA along with my fellow chief brothers in arms. And so it's an honor to be here with you all. We're living through such a historical and dynamic time in our country, our nation, and our military, and our airmen and our guardians are relying on us to lead them through these difficult challenges. And you know what I've learned here at the Academy is we need to do this together, right? I represent not only the cadets here, but obviously our airmen of the force here. And so understanding kind of how we all work together, all of our MAJCOMs work together to make things happen. And so I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah. All right, Chief Hoffman, Moose.
Hey, hello to everybody out there, all the airmen out there watching. Hey, virtually just want to say hello from Minot Air Force Base. Obviously, only the best come north, Chief. You know that. So I got to spend this morning out with our CRF defenders and our helo folks out on the line, out in the -15, -40 wind chill. So I'm here to tell you it's an honor to be able to represent the voice of all of our airmen in Global Strike and just be a part of this esteemed panel. And Global Strike is always ready to compete or die, Chief.
All right. Well, Moose, thank you, and thanks for being there. You know, with our airmen and our guardians. And you're exactly right. Our airmen do remarkable things, regardless of the condition, regardless of the location, what they're doing. And Sarah, as you noted, what an incredible and dynamic time that it is that you serve and our airmen serve today. And so to that, I'd then like to start off, and Chief Hoffman and Chief Kruzelnick, BK, I'm going to throw y'all the first question dealing with this dynamic time. You know, COVID-19 presents some unique challenges, and now we have a new one. It's the vaccinations. So how are you dealing with getting the word out and overcoming the objections that some may have to this new vaccine? Moose, I'll let you start, and then BK after you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chief. You know, when I think about the challenge to I'd say the opportunity to have the vaccine rollout, you know, I think about our time in Global Strike when the virus and the pandemic first became an issue last January, February timeframe. And I just want to start by saying that I'm amazed at our airmen writ large in the Air Force, the way we've adapted, whether it be teleworking, using forums and mediums such as Zoom to connect and stay connected. But what we were able to do early on for Global Strike was to really do some innovation, doing some very smart scheduling, to be able to continue to be, if not as good, better operationally and in the means of readiness for all of our forces, conventional and nuclear. At the end of it, we became stronger. Our readiness has actually never been better. And then as far as the challenge of vaccine rollout, you know, I think in Global Strike, what we've focused on is what we got out of our success early on and how we've overcome the COVID crisis early on, which is really thinking about the facts of the vaccine, focusing on what it is and what it isn't. You know, our take rates by being, I think, transparent and allowing our airmen to make really good decisions have been really pretty good through our Tier 1A, Tier 1B for the vaccine. And, as our forces rotated in and rotated out to stay COVID safe, they've rotated in and rotated through the way we've distributed the COVID vaccine. So I think for us, it was transparency. It was about an informed decision. It was about a discussion. And I think that led to airmen making the right decision for themselves and the Air Force.
Okay, good. BK, any additional thoughts?
Not too much, Chief. I mean, Chief Hoffman really kind of nailed it. I think it just comes down to timely and accurate communication. The same thing when COVID first started, as the Chief said. You kind of got to get in front of your formations. It has to be non-emotional, it has to be fact-based, but you have to get in front of your formations. Because in light of not communicating often and early with your team, they're going to get information elsewhere. And where they get it elsewhere most likely might not be accurate. It might be misinformation, and it makes the decision even tougher after that. So kind of leading from the front, get in front of the team, let them know what it is and what it isn't. I think there's probably two fundamental questions you always have to answer. Where do I fit and how does it affect me? So if you kind of go with that mindset with your explanation, I think you can help the airmen make the best decision possible. And then if you too believe that you should be taking the vaccination, then get up front. And if you fall into the appropriate tier, get your vaccination. And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is there's kind of a wait moment, like let you get it first and let me see if everything's okay, and then I'll get it. So I don't necessarily think there's going to be maybe a lot of denial after it's been out for a little bit, although there might be not as much of a take rate right now. I think there's a little bit of a wait and see to make sure that it's still safe, and it's been tested through two versions, and before it got rolled out to us. I know it's an emergency and it's non-mandatory at this time, but it still was a tested drug. And it's very simple, 2 phases, 2 series of it. The first one is injected into you. It allows you to build up this blood protein, what we know as antibodies. And then whatever got put into you through the syringe, just your body gets rid of it. So it doesn't even stay with you, and it just allows you to build up the right antibody to attack COVID. So just the education piece, non-emotional, factual, and get in front of the team. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly understand it myself. I was, I guess, fortunately, or now just recognizing my age, I was in the first wave. So I had my first shot, and now I'm waiting on my second one. All right. Well, with that, BK, let me ask you then to follow up, regarding the fact that, now and probably into the unforeseen future, we hope sooner than later, airmen are assessing into new units under the challenge of COVID restrictions. What suggestions do you have to enable units to still properly welcome their new airmen or new guardians, for those listening, into their units?
I appreciate the question, Chief. And I think it comes down to onboarding and sponsorship. Probably the same thing when you were in Chief, but obviously a little bit tougher to get after that. As soon as you get a rip and you see that individuals coming to your unit, we got to reach out early and often again. Let them know that it's going to be okay. Let them know whatever procedures happens to be your area. If you're going to Dave Wolfe or Chief, Blais's area, at the end of the day, that might have some different requirements and maybe moving components. So you got to get in front of the angst of not knowing and let them know exactly what they need to do and not do, and have that sponsor see it all the way through. So as soon as they land on that base, that you have constant contact. If they have to be ROM, then you're supporting them through the ROM. As soon as they have the opportunity, bring them in to see the command team. Let the command team get to know them, and then kind of lay out the values and beliefs of the organization, right? That's where it starts. You can't assume what you don't know. And if you never met this person before, you don't know what they're coming to your organization with. So lay it out. Lay out the beliefs of and the norms within your organization, what you guys believe in. And once again, how do they fit? And that'll talk to their daily purpose. Now they understand why they're assigned there and the importance of being assigned there. Then it could be a contributor. If a pizza delivery person can deliver pizza to my house, I feel like we can get in there and we can still meet underneath the COVID preventive measures and take time to do a face-to-face with people coming into organization. It's COVID-19 and now we're in 2021, right? So we have to have some assembly of a battle rhythm that as we gain new people, we assemble them into the new unit the best way possible so they have a feeling of connection, not only to their peers, not only to the leader, not only to their organization, but to what we actually do. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, because you're exactly right. It is the lifelong or the continuum that always important to welcome our airmen into our bases and their family members there. All right. Well, I have one other COVID-related question, and I want to toss this question out to Chief Wolfe and Chief Blais. How about you, Dave? How are the airmen and families in the overseas locations handling COVID life after a full year in this global environment? Because as I've talked with you and others before, is that different nations are dealing with this in different ways. So across your AORs, how are you finding airmen dealing with because not only our Air Force rules of engagement, also in countries that they're in.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Chief. And this goes to vaccine rollout, and I mean everything that's happening with COVID is heavily impacted by where you are, and it is a relative disease, right? Although the disease doesn't care about where it's going and what it's doing, everywhere you go, there's a different setup and a different a way of handling it. And I know BK could speak to this, having moved from Japan to CONUS, during COVID. Our airmen that are having to move during this, our airmen who are having to try to go on leave, emergency leave. I mean, life is moving on. Tragedies are happening, and all of the things that we've had to deal with any other year have not really stopped. But our ability to get our folks taken care of has been severely hampered, and it's a concern. It really is. It's a concern for my boss, General Wilsbach. We talk about it daily, about what we can do to make smart risk decisions that are in the area of letting our folks have a little bit more ability to impact their own lives. We have a situation across the Pacific where in Korea and Japan, it's a 14-day hard quarantine when you come back into the country. There really isn't any negotiating on that, and it doesn't matter if you live off base or on base, or if you go to some places in the United States, you guys could probably agree with me. There's places in the United States where you might not think that there's anything going on that's different from normal times. Maybe you see a few more people running around with masks on, but for the most part, there's a lot of places in the United States that are kind of open. So I think that perspective isn't really understood by folks that haven't lived in these specific environments during that time. We don't anticipate that we're going to get a whole lot of relief from the foreign governments that we partner with in these countries anytime in the real near future. We keep hoping that things will kind of get better and that the numbers will kind of flatten out, but our families are still kind of stuck with dealing with this. It's unprecedented. It's unprecedented to tell someone, hey, you're going to have to make a value decision here and a risk decision based on what you're going to have to do, not only going to the States, because if you haven't been tracking either, or I think maybe this kind of language has been lost in the last few months too, level 2 countries, right? If you're in a level 2 country and you're coming back to the States, you even have to quarantine going into the States. And Korea and Japan, according to the CDC, are still level 2 countries. We've been trying to work to get some things changed in that department, but so far, no movement there. So our families are having to make decisions that they've never really had to make before. And when you have to decide between quarantining for 2 weeks or going to attend your mother's funeral, and that's an actual, calculus that you have to go through in your mind, that's not where we want to be, right? We don't want to be in a situation where folks are having to make those kinds of decisions. So we're anxious to move into 21 and get further down the road. The vaccine, I think, is super important in this. I think our folks really have to give that a hard look and understand that. At this point, I'm not sure that talking about take rates is even the right place to be. Right now, our supply of vaccine at all of our bases is not such that everybody that wants one can get one yet. We'll be there eventually across the whole globe, right? I mean, it's going to take a few more vaccines being approved. It's going to take other countries getting on the bus with their vaccine, whatever they've decided to go with. And it's going to take that supply chain to really kick on before we can really start worrying about take rate. Right now, we just need to worry about making sure every shot we have available gets into somebody's arm that's eligible to get it, right? That should be kind of our push going forward. And once we get a little further on down the road, we hope that our families will get some relief and that we'll be able to move past this thing. But thanks for the question, Chief. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Great points. And really, you made a note of such an incredibly important part of some of the stress on the family that they deal with. All right, Brian, your thoughts.
Yeah, Dave obviously hit pretty in depth. What I will add is I think the fatigue that a lot of people are feeling in the States is probably a little bit more pronounced overseas because of the additional restrictions levied upon our airmen and their families by the host nations. I think if we start with our single airmen, if you could imagine that we've been in this for well over a year now, and we've had airmen that PCS'd in to their first duty station. They went through basic training and probably didn't have a graduation, didn't see their families. They're now at their first duty station and they've not been able to go home and see their families. In some cases, if they're in a location like Turkey, we can't even use Space A for them to be able to get home. So even if they could get home and take the leave within that time period, including RUM and all those other factors, there's a huge cost on top of it. So we're definitely seeing fatigue amongst that portion of the force. And unfortunately, it's manifesting itself in self-destructive behaviors, all the things that we just, we see in a normal time. And I think it's even worse in this environment because of the isolation that a lot of our airmen are feeling. Even though we're all in this together, they definitely feel that isolation. On the family side, I think the two larger impacts is going to be schools and childcare. So when this initially started, childcare is already restricted, and there's not as many locations off base in which to put your children, particularly if you live on the economy. And so as we started to reduce the capacity on base, it's really put a lot of stress. So when we go into work, we'll see people with children there sometimes. And over the summer, there were children at work. We've seen pets at work. We've seen, things that you just wouldn't imagine 5 years ago that you would see these types of things. But my hat's off to the commanders and the leaders across Host Command because they have literally done everything we can to get the job done. If you hear General Walters speak, his main priority is not letting COVID become a security concern for this theater. And we have been able to push through every operation with flying colors, and it's not become a security concern, but it's taken a toll on the families, as you mentioned with this question, is undeniably our airmen are ready for this to be over, but we have to just kind of hold the line and keep pushing through this and to do the right thing. Even when we feel like we're at a good place, there's going to be nations around the world that are still challenged by this virus, and so this is going to be this isn't a battle, this is a war, and it's going to take a while to fight through it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian. And the fact that you see it, you understand it, you articulate it the way that both of you have, and I know the others should give our airmen great confidence in the leadership that in your care for leading our airmen during this time frame. So thank you. All right, I want to shift our questioning a little bit, more towards the leadership of our airmen, and I'll start with Chief Sparks on this question. But this one I think is one that any or all of you, if you want to be able to add to it. And it's the Air Force is recently announcing 10 airman leadership qualities for officers in the grade of 01 through 06 and senior non-commissioned officers in the grade of E7 through E9. The announcement went on to say that airman leadership qualities are expected to form the basis of future officer and enlisted performance reporting systems. Why the focus on these particular ranks, and what outcomes are you expecting to achieve, especially for our enlisted leaders now and in the future? Sarah?
Chief, that's a great question, and I know it's a question on a lot of our airmen's minds. I think if you've heard, the Chief of Staff and our Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force have stated that we're kind of beginning a journey towards a new evaluation system, one that both our enlisted and officer corps can share alike, one that demonstrates and measures what we value in a clearer way than what we currently do today. And so what we want to do is not wait until we get it perfected, but get it out there and try to figure out what we need to make adjustments to. So you asked the question about why are these things only being targeted to our senior NCOs and then our officer corps in the 01 through 06 category. We're trying to push this out. These things have been created. They are in connection with our Air Force 1-2 Air Force culture regulation, so that they all kind of tie in together. And it's easy for us to kind of understand how they affect us and how we're measured and all those things. What we need to do is push that out. What we didn't want to do is affect a young airman who doesn't understand the current process and kind of make them go through this new process. So our senior NCOs and our young officers, like we felt would be the best to articulate how they receive this, if we need to make any adjustments to it. In the future, this will eventually replace the new ACA along with the new EPR system, and it will be effective mandatory for all ranks, E1 through 010. So right now we're kind of in a beta test, right? 4 wings and 4 different MAJCOMs will be represented in this beta test. We want feedback from our force, and they're listening, and we'll make adjustments to it after that before we go on. One of the things I did want to kind of talk to a little bit is, feedback is something that's so critical to our performance and everything that we do. And I don't feel like we do a very good job of that. If you ask airmen in the force, many folks will say, I've not gotten my ACA this year, or it's not very effective. And so we want to make this something that's a better quality feedback, obviously. And kind of underarching all of that too is we have an officer development strategy. We don't have an enlisted force development strategy, and that is something that our enlisted force is working on right now. And I'm going to ask Chief Wolfe to kind of talk a little bit about that and how all of the ALQs and the new evaluation system will fall in line with that. So Chief Wolfe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot for that, Chief Sparks. I think it's, first pretty awesome to point out that we are syncing this up across the entire force is the goal, right? This is not something that's just for enlisted or just for officers. I think it's also important to note that in this enlisted force development strategy, this will be kind of a cradle to grave document that feeds and informs all of the other documents and programs and schools and curriculum and everything that's out there. Will be informed by this enlisted force development strategy. Now, to write a good strategy, sometimes it takes some time, right? So I think a lot of times our folks get a little nervous when we say, yeah, we're working on this new thing, and then they don't hear anything about it for 6 months, a year, or however long it takes. This is a priority for the Chief Master on the Air Force. This is a priority for the Chief of Staff, and a pretty aggressive timeline has been put on this thing, like May of this year is when we're going to have kind of the first semblance of the document being put together. I think it's important to note as well that all the folks on this screen and the other MAJCOM chiefs, and then some of our NAF chiefs, and then functional managers, there's a lot of people that are being asked to serve on different parts and panels of this strategy development, and that it's going to be a great document. And I'll just throw this out there, and this is just one person's opinion here. This is what I hope. I hope that at the end of this, from enlisted force development strategy to whatever our evaluation and promotion system ends up looking like on the back side of it, I hope that we move from what I would describe as more of a goal-based system that we are under right now to more of a growth-based system where we are taking airmen, we're moving to where they are, and we're working with them on the things that we think that they need to improve upon, and then we're just trying to walk with them the next step, right? And then we're doing another reset. Okay, where are we at now, and what can we do now? All of us are in a different place. I came into the Air Force as a young person with no direction and no real understanding of what it is exactly that I wanted to do with my life. And the Air Force, through good leaders along my path, was able to help me build myself a life, really, is what the Air Force did for me. And I want to I hope that at the end of this, we've even improved upon that process even more to give our young folks faster, better feedback to make them stronger and more capable in a better way than we were able to do growing up in our system.
Great. Anyone else want to comment on this question?
Yeah, hey Chief, this is Moose Global Strike. You know, I'm super excited about the ALQs. You know, I know that we don't have everything cemented down. I really think that we're in the right spot, having senior NCOs with skin in the game to really take a look at the first beta of the feedback. I think we'll get really good feedback of what the product looks like and what it says that we're asking for. I really like that. But here's what I like most about it. You know, we always talk about toxicity. We talk about those managers versus leaders. And I think, you know, if the last 20 years has proved anything, is we can crank out sorties and we can do one or two things really, really well, all important, right, against the global war on terrorism. But what I like about it is the stretch that's going to be required, ALQs, right? There's a lot more to the Air Force and the Space Force than sortie generation numbers and production numbers and metrics. And what I think it's going to get at and drive towards is commanders, chiefs, NCO, IC. I always tell the NCOs, you know, the IC part means you're in charge, which means that means you're accountable for not only their successes, but when we're not successful. I think it will speak to the things you're going to grow to be able to need to do that, to really grow airmen as your own, to just own the unit that you're in, as opposed to riding around in a rental car. You're going to care about the oil change. You're going to care about the pressure in the tires, because the things we're going to measure, I think at the end of the day, culturally, is different than we're going to measure today, right now. When you look at the current system, it's very much, as Chief Wolfe mentioned, kind of goal metered. But, you know, how do you capture how you improve the unit through innovation and collaboration with not only internal partners, but external partners? You know, how do you talk about how you've led the unit to a better culture and to a place where I want to stay because I feel like I belong to something greater than myself? You know, and those facts will be meted out, and the performance will be meted out, not by the number of sorties around the pole, but the amount of deterrence and lethality you generate, all the while creating a place that people want to belong to, and they want to stay, and they want to contribute and make it to what I think it was maybe 30 or 40 years, where it was more than just a job. It was a way of life. And so for all those reasons, I'm super excited in the direction that we're going. And I hope that the senior NCOs really take a good look at what we're asking on those things. Look at the words matter. Make sure we're getting that right. We think we are, but we got to go forward, and we're in a great direction, Chief. Thanks for letting me contribute.
Yeah, thank you, Moose. And just an editorial to all of you and a testament to your leadership. I read that 2020, you had one of the highest re-enlistment rates in the history of our Air Force. We know there's a lot of factors that play into that, but a great factor that plays into that is about having great leadership. Leadership matters, always has, and the leadership you are providing to our force is a great testament to that. So congratulations to that. And Moose, you also hit on the fact of global threat and ultimately part of developing airmen is about the readiness of our forces and their readiness to be able to take and do what we call on them, and to be able to do. And that's to win, any wars or any conflict that we might go into. So Moose, let me follow on with you. The fact that we're in an era of great power competition today. We know this intellectually, but what does it mean practically? How are you taking that concept and making it real for today's airmen?
Yeah, great question, Chief. Thank you for that. Making it real is extremely important. We just talked about the challenges of COVID, and the challenges, you know, I think we talked about relationships in the force, and BK brought up about diversity, inclusion, belonging earlier on in his thing. Here's the bottom line, folks. You know, our adversaries, they're not struggling with this. They're not worrying about gaining and closing the gap on us over some challenges. They're moving forward at a rapid pace, and we have got to rise to the challenge and answer the bell. It's imperative for our deterrence and for our mission to be to maintain air power superiority. You know, when you read a book, there's a book called Why Air Forces Fail. And so I'll begin by my answer by referencing that. And it's never TTPs or it's never necessarily resources what it always is the lack of margin and the loss of margin. And so when we talk about great power competition, we gotta look at the amount of margin that we're going to be able to create, whether it be in personal airman resiliency or in the platforms that we move forward with, and the exercises that we move on to teach the force what we're going to need to meet the puck, like in hockey terms, skate to the puck where it's going to be in 2030. And so for global strike perspective, you know, the great power competition is a daily thought. You know, when we come out and go reach out to Chief Blais's AOR, right, and we provide challenges with our bomber task forces. You know, that's a deliberate effort to change the game a little bit. Or we come out to Chief Wolfe's area there in PACAF, and we move away from continuous bomber presence at Guam, and we move to a more of a dynamic force employment with these bomber task forces. That is putting the great power competition first and foremost, while at the same time training our young lieutenant colonels, majors, senior master sergeants to lead in a small team environment that isn't relying on huge logistical trains and all of the trappings of the things that we have been able to expect to have happen for us, knowing that our adversary gets a say in our plans. And so doing that, and then through fighting the base, you know, this idea that there's no sanctuary in the continental United States based on the threat today, and then making that realization translate into exercises that actually exercise our airmen to think of themselves as every airman defender, right? What does that mean? I need to defend against cyber threats. I need to defend against physical threats. How are we going to launch these sorties? How are we going to load and launch these sorties off to where they need to go, while knowing that we have to do that under a challenge, right? We are in a competition, and to do that through exercising, and then the modernization of all that, right? So when we talk about modernization, you know, is everything that we are dreaming up, is it practical, doable? Is it deliverable to the field? Is it on time? Is it on budget? Is it easily upgradable? Is it deployable, fieldable? Do the platforms that we recapitalize and modernize, do they have margin in them to continue to meet the challenge going forward? Things like the ground-based strategic deterrent, right? Owning the tech on it and being able to upgrade those components while minimizing the threat to those systems, B-21, B-52, B-2, MH-139. Our airmen not only need to exercise different and operate different through BTFs, fighting the base and such, but they've got to see a new platform delivered that helps us get there, that's actually going to be fielded and quite frankly stays ahead of the adversary's OODA loop. And they continue to march on, whether we struggle and fail with COVID or we can't get along with each other or teamwork issues, or they don't care. None of that matters to them. And we need to keep that solidly in our mind when we are in a competition. You know, think of it as a 100-meter dash at the Olympics. Usain Bolt doesn't care that you got a case of the flu. He's gonna win gold, right? And we got to take that same competitive mindset from the flight line to the support side to the academy, up and down the line. And I think we're in a good place and we're moving in the right direction. But that's the place I want to skate to in the future, is to meet the adversary where they're going to be at. Thanks, Chief, for the question.
It's a great point, Moose, there, and how important our airmen recognize the threat, the potential threat, and think broader and deeper there. And to
Chief,
that,
do you mind can I add something to that? Do you mind?
absolutely. Go ahead, BK.
I really think that it's interesting that the first question that Chief Hoffman answered informed his second, and you asked him about ALQs. Every baseline of what we need to be successful and what he just said starts with those qualities up front. So we take those qualities and we mash them into the 4 major graded areas, which is, again, the majority of areas he talked about, resource management, executing the mission, leading individuals. That all ties together. And then to go back to Chief Sparks, eventually that will be informed by a strategic enlisted strategy. So we're taking it from baseline. We're trying to build the qualities that we need to execute that, and then form that with milestones within a career, whether it's PME, whether it's job opportunity, wherever it may be, to grow that. So hopefully that the airmen that come in after us that we're assessing today will feel the effects of what we're trying to lay down foundationally right now to build to that autonomous, ready to adapt in any situation type of warrior that's required to execute that. That's what I had, Chief. Thank you.
Well, great. Well, that's a great segue then, because I wanted to ask the next question to Chief Sparks. Sarah, you have a little different from the other chiefs, a very unique command, there with the Air Force Academy. And of course, today, the Academy is focused on preparing our cadets and getting after the Chief of Staff's accelerate a change or lose a message. To this point, the Academy recently stood up an Institute for Future Conflict. How does this action and the Institute meld with the focus of the Chief of Staff and the Air Force's direction? And how does this correlate also in the development of our officers with the development of our enlisted leaders?
Chief, that's a great question. Thank you for that. So yes, coming to the Academy was it's a whole different dynamic and much of a learning experience for me, but developing our officers and enlisted alike is equally important to me. And I think sometimes we kind of segregate the two. And I think absolutely today we need to start incorporating that development together. And so I've had the opportunity to learn a little bit about the Institute for Future Conflict. And I by far am not the smartest on the subject. We could spend 2 or 3 hours talking about what they do here in regards to that. But it was initiated by Dr. Paul Kaminsky and the Big Idea paper. But the idea behind it is really talking about getting after what the future conflict looks like and trying to get our curriculum and everything that we do to change the mindset here and to prepare cadets for what that might look like in the future. So I'll just give you a few little pieces of it. That way we can tie that into the enlisted side a little bit. But it does get after some of the 2 of the action orders in particular, and really you can tie it to all 4 of the Chief of Staff's accelerator change, both in airmen and competition. And they really try to tie in the curriculum here. So there's 29 core curriculum hours that each cadet will have in regards to that will kind of tie into the fundamentals of the future fight, and whether it's the understanding the conflicts of warfare, understanding the adversary, or understanding emerging and disrupting technologies. And so there's so many things that go into just those things, but each cadet will get at least 29 courses in regarding that. They do have a 47-month total 4-year experience here in which they're integrating both experiential learning. So for example, they'll do a leadership ropes course and they'll throw in a future fight scenario. So they're kind of testing their stress levels. The other piece is the human performance piece, right? No conflict is without the human parts of it. And so they talk a little bit about the dynamics of the human performance. They have a peak performance center here. So they tie into all of the 4 pillars that we all know very well. A lot of research programs are developed here. We're doing a lot of work with industry and other universities and different seminars. We send our airmen, or cadets, I should say, future airmen to different universities for research, and they're able to work with, for example, the Space Warfighting Center at West Point, different things like that. So then they bring back that experience to the Academy. So there's a tremendous amount of effort going into this. And I would say it's only going to grow and adapt and change as we understand the future challenges that we face. What I think we could do in integrating that with the enlisted forces as we build our enlisted force development strategy is tying into some of these same concepts into our PME, into our training, into the development of our enlisted force. And so I think we, as we progress into that, I think hopefully we'll see a little bit more of that. Because I do think we have to do this together, right? And when we talk about how we're going to measure this, as BK said, our ALQs identify some new characteristics and things that we value, and we want to measure things like adaptability, inclusion, and teamwork, decision-making, innovation. The multi-capable airmen that we need in the future is very different than the airmen that I was and that we all were when we came in. So that's just a little bit of kind of what we're doing here, but I hope that we can kind of grow some of those concepts over on the enlisted side as well. Thank you.
Well, it is exciting, there indeed. And what our time is rapidly coming to a close, and I've got a lot more questions and all, but I think let me do this. I'm going to ask Chief Wolfe to the point that Sarah just made about multi-capable airmen being the foundation of our new lieutenants in the force, and the attributes she talked about: innovation, decision-making, resiliency. How do these attributes relate to the enlisted force of today and more so in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chief. With agile combat employment being kind of the way of the future, and with the large base construct sanctuary that Chief Hoffman talked about earlier not being available to us anymore as a real option, I think it's super important that we kind of morph the way that we're doing business, the way we think. And it's really nothing new. That's the great news, right? I mean, you can look at the island hopping campaign we did right after the attacks on Pearl Harbor, and the stories of Jimmy Doolittle and his team and what they did for an example of how that was done rapidly, and it was done with a lot of smart risk taken. But at the end of the day, when those bombers took off of that aircraft carrier for the first time ever, every single one of those pilots thought they probably weren't coming back, right? So we can do this. Now, what I think is amazing about what Chief Sparks just talked about is the Air Force Academy and our education processes and all of our, what we're talking about with ALQs, everything is kind of based around moving away from an industrial age of educating, training, and assessing people into the force. This is not big factory work, right? That's not what we're trying to get. Yet our education systems, if you look at them largely, are still based around kind of that industrial age model. And as we move to the future, we've got to think about the fact that our young folks are not necessarily even of the same, kind of weren't brought up in the same way that we were, where, it was a good idea to get a good job with a company and spend 25 or 30 years there and get a gold watch and a good retirement. They're looking for options. So not that we can't keep them for 20 or 25 years and get them a good retirement. We can still do that, but we're going to have to speak to their desire for variety, for change, for adaptability. And we've got to do that for our folks because they're the ones that are going to deliver the capability for us to be able to do things differently than we did in the past. We are doing exercises in the Pacific, and all of the MAJCOMs are doing these exercises in different ways, where we're having pilots refuel their own aircraft. That may, not too long ago, that may have been seen as something super crazy as an idea, right? But that is the way of the future. We are going to be moving toward an airman that can be more agile, can have more skills, and that when the situation calls for it, they'll be able to do exactly what it is that needs to be done. And they'll be able to do it without a whole lot of supervision, without maybe not even a degraded communications environment, maybe a no communications environment, where they are able to move out on exactly what we need to do and make decisions that we may not have asked, we may not have been asked to make in our younger days.
Great. Well, thank you, Dave. All right, we're going to finish up with a rapid fire. As you look at, and we've talked about current operating environment, challenges clearly our airmen potentially face in the future. Brion, I'm going to start with you. What are the airmen of tomorrow going to need to be successful, or what final words of direction or encouragement would you have for our airmen? And you're on mute.
I am on mute. All right, great, fantastic. So really quickly, Dave hit one thing that I think is incredibly important, the adaptability, resiliency, and commitment. I think those are the three things that our airmen are going to have. Those are all things we value now, but definitely in the future, when we're asking them to do more, there's not any point in our career where we were asked to do less, and I don't think that's going to change. So the airmen are going to be asked to do more, probably in different areas. There's probably going to be a lot more multi-crafting. And then that's going to drive a lot more stress. We know that, you know, and resilience is just about mitigating that stress. It's about being able to handle that. It's being able to overcome adversity. So I think that we're going to have to own this as a service. This is not something we can push off in the medical community. This is people business. This is NCO business. And then I think finally, you know, adaptability, resilience, and then commitment. You know, we all are committed for different reasons. Each of us is going to have to find out whatever our why is, but regardless, going forward into the future, there's no way that we can overcome any future adversary without a commitment to our teammates, our unit, our service, our nation. You know, that level of commitment is going to be needed going into the future.
Great points, Brion. BK, rapid fire.
I think we need to work with connection, Chief. You know, we need to connect the airmen or the guardians to the service that they join. We need to connect them to the unit that they're assigned. You need to connect them to you as a leader, and we need to help them connect to their peers as a whole. You know, we always say every airman has a story, and that's true, and we didn't know that. But you know what else has a story is most of our units, a rich history of sheer excellence. And if we're able to marry those two up, there's nothing but magic that is to be found once you have the ability to do that. There also has to be kind of this understanding that when you gain somebody into your unit, they were somewhere before you got them. So this means they have experiences, they have perceptions, they have perspectives, and all that was given to them by the experiences they had. We all have a past for good or bad. We all had a childhood for good or bad. We all had experiences in other units for good or bad. So when you inherit that person, you need to take that in consideration. And you start with a lot of transparency and a lot of investment up front to move towards trust, where we're ultimately trying to get. And have them feel comfortable in the organization and understand their daily purpose, as we talked about earlier, as well as understanding where they fit. And I think those are two huge things. And then lastly, you know, we have to build this environment, especially the command team kind of owns this, but you have to build this environment where everybody has a person. Now, the command team can't be the person for everybody. There's just too many of them and not enough of the command team. But they have to have an environment where you can have a person. Where I'm in my worst day, I know that somebody's looking out for me, and I'm also looking out for other people on their worst day. That's where like the courageousness comes in. Courageousness is reaching out and helping. We see somebody that's going through a tough time, but it's also receiving that same warm, welcoming hand when you're experiencing things that are tough as well. You know, at the end of the day, we rise together or we fall together, and I'd rather that we rise together. So much love to everybody, and I appreciate the opportunity, Chief.
Thank you, BK. Sarah.
Well, sir, I think members and leaders of teams is what we need in our future. So it's all about the team concept. We need to build our leaders with character and who are adaptable, innovative, critical thinkers, problem solvers, decision makers, and resilient. I would say I am surrounded by brilliance in both our young airmen and the cadets that are surrounding me. And I would say our future is in great hands. We just need to empower them. We need to guide them in the right direction, and we need to unleash them. So I look forward to our future. Thank you so much for having us on today.
Thank you. Dave?
So I'll just go with one of what things that Sarah said there, which is innovation. Innovation is sometimes becomes kind of a buzzword, right? A lot of folks like to use it. Sometimes I'm not sure what it means, you know, depending on the context that it's used in. But here's what I think it means. I think innovation cannot exist without trust. And here's what I think it looks like. I think it looks like wherever you are in the organization, if you bring an idea to your leadership and they just immediately get on the bus and try to help you with your idea, Now, obviously, they're going to do a little calculation to say, okay, is this going to get somebody killed, or is this, illegal or immoral? But once that, split second, intuition that our leaders already have, determination is made, let's move out. If folks go to their bosses with a great idea, and their bosses say, hey, that's a great idea, let's give it a shot. I think what we'll find is that about 80% of the time, our people are coming up with really good ideas. And they want to do good things, and they're not waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror and saying, I think I'm going to go sabotage the operation today. Our airmen are not doing that. They want to come to work. They want to do a great job, and they want to make what they've got better. So let's let them do that. Let's turn them loose on that. It starts with trust. We have to trust them, and if it fails, okay, that's a learning moment. That is not a character flaw. It is an opportunity for us to learn something and then make an adjustment and move on. I think we've got to have that. I think without that piece as part of our future, we won't be able to make a whole lot of strides forward. So I think we've got the right people in the right places to make these things a reality, and I'm really looking forward to working with everybody on what we're going to have for a 2030, a 2040, a 2050 airmen out there in the force. And thanks a lot for having us on again, Chief Murray. Really a huge honor.
Thank you. All right, Moose, you get the final word.
Final word. Thanks, Chief. A lot of folks touched on it. Trust, right? If you look at everything that ails our organization, it revolves around trust, right? Vaccine rollout, how training is going to go. I'm going to show up to work on time. It's all about trust. The thing that I lose sleep about as a leader, and I think many leaders lose or think about at least, is how much do my airmen trust me, right? That what I say through is backed up by moment upon moment upon moment of previous history with that airman or this set of airmen, that they believe what I am saying that we should do right is a true statement to a level of commitment and loyalty. And then vice versa, Dave touched on this, how much do I actually trust my airmen, right? And there is a whole wide net of vulnerability in both of those questions, but I think it's the most important question a leader can ask about themselves and their organization, is to really understand where the trust level is. Because my experience, whether you're the war bowls or out at the 5th CES, I walk in there. If you're the war bowls, I walk in there. I know their culture rocks, and they trust each other with their life, and that is just the way it is. And guess what? They don't have a lot of wringing hands, and they're just ready to move out every day because they're highly communicated, well transparent organization, and the training's there and all that stuff, right? None of that there's no negatives, and the trust is extremely high there. I go to some other units where there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'll tell you what, you can point to a chief or a master sergeant or a captain or somebody that has not earned the trust of those airmen in that group, and you see a disheveled or disinterested, disengaged group of airmen, quote unquote, following them. I think the ALQs get after trust. I think where we're going with all the ACE and the dynamic force employment and how we're going to train our academy graduates gets after trust. But the big question for leadership needs to ask themselves is, how much do my airmen trust me, and how much do I trust my airmen? Because without trust, we got nothing. But I love being a part of it. I love everybody on the screen, and BK, Dave, Sarah, Brian. If you told this 19-year-old A1C weather cat that he was going to be on a stage like this with these people and this caliber of chiefs, I'd have told you to get out of town. I mean, it's just amazing to be here and to be with you, Chief Murray. It's just such an honor. So thanks, and thanks to all the airmen out there.
Well, Moose, it is for me as well. An oft-used statement about your service is leave it better than you found it. I'm happy to say that my generation left it better than we found it because of you, who you are today. Such a great chief, so much better than what we were. And that's what I see of our airmen across the force today. They're so much better. And I certain for our future that because of your leadership, they'll be better in the future as well. So thank you for your great words of wisdom in our, in our Air Force. It's been a pleasure to have you with us today in AFA's virtual Aerospace Warfare Symposium. And thank you all to those who tuned in to watch this panel on the total force. Please be sure to check our AFA's daily report for the latest coverage of our virtual Aerospace Warfare Symposium.